let's jump into the top 25. Let's throw that sucker on the board, and we'll start 25 through 11. We're not gonna go team by team here, guys, and talk about this. But just kind of looking at some of the rankings, you got South Carolina there at the 11 spot. I think that's a decent spot for them. If their offense would have looked better, I would have argued that they needed to be farther up there. But with the way that the offense kind of sputtered and getting the help from the special teams touchdown, which is a good thing. You want help from the special teams, but I think that kind of hindered them, in my eyes, from being able to slide on up into the top 10, which is where I think they'll probably end up as the season goes on. Um, Oklahoma at 16. Watch out for Oklahoma. Auburn at 25. I think Auburn is going to be able to work their way on up the board throughout the season. I think they'll be lingering around the top 25. Hugh Freeze better hope so. Tennessee looked a little better than what we thought, but all in all, what you got any comments on these? Alabama slides to 23, and I think that's the perfect spot for them. So I
Yeah.
said really anywhere between 20 and 25. I think you could argue Alabama not being in the top 25. I would listen to the argument. I don't know that that's necessarily correct, but I would listen to the argument. I think there's an argument that could be made. Is Utah real? No one will know. I can't bet on them. I'm scared to death. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Auburn's probably a little bit high. I definitely think that we want to kind of give them their flowers after a pretty big win over Baylor, but we like what we saw out of the Auburn Tigers, so they do get sort of that last slot there. Utah, huge win over UCLA. I don't know what UCLA is going to be with Nico at quarterback. He looked absolutely out of it. But Utah looked really solid. I thought that their new quarterback that transferred in had a really good game. So I think the surprising one here for a lot of people is going to be Alabama going all the way down to 23. But Florida State was not a ranked team. This was a team that won 2 games last year. I think that Florida State beat Alabama handedly enough to warrant moving them outside of the top 20 and really outside of playoff contention at this point in the season. Outside of that, you did see Texas A&M kind of struggle with UTSA to kind of put them away. That's a pretty decent little football program, but I think that Texas A&M is going to be in the hunt for the playoffs throughout most of the season. Big game coming up in week 3 up against Notre Dame. So we'll have to kind of wait and see on Texas A&M until then, really what they can be. But outside of that, I mean, Florida State moving all the way up to 13, kind of opposite of Alabama for the opposite reasons. I think that we can move Florida State to the top 15 and feel warranted in doing so.
All right, you got Arizona State at 10, Clemson at 9, Notre Dame 8, Texas 7, and Oregon 6. I could have stood to see Texas drop a little farther, but I mean, when you lose a game to such a highly ranked team, and we're so early in the season where nobody's got great wins really yet, not a lot of teams anyway. You can see how Texas gets to hang around there, but I think they're more like a 10th best team in the country right now. But these rankings are a little different than power rankings, right? These are our actual top 25 rankings. So not a power rating, people, not a power rating, not who would beat who on a neutral field. That's not how this works. But you see, we've got losers right here in the top 10. So we got teams that are 0-1 in the top 10 here, working their way down the list. I don't think any of those teams will be losing in week 2. So you would consider them to probably hang around there until somebody else gets some quality wins and deserves to get over the top of them. Oregon at 6 there. What are your thoughts on 6 through 10?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of taking a wait and see, kind of taking a flyer here on Oregon at 6. They played absolutely nobody in Montana State and still managed to give up 13 points. So I think it's fair to question the defense there a little bit. Now, I didn't watch this game. That those 13 points may have come from some mop up duty with a second or third string defense out there. Have no idea on that, but But I do think that Oregon's talented enough to crack the top 10 and really be on the fringe of the top 5 here. Texas didn't really feel comfortable moving them down too far. If you lose to what is, spoiler alert, our number 1 team in the country in Ohio State, I don't think that you should really fall too much because of that. And their defense played so strong, held Ohio State to just over 200 yards total. I think this could potentially be the best team, the best defense in the country. And for that, I don't feel comfortable moving them any further than 7 at the moment. And then Notre Dame, in the same sense, loses to a Miami team. They're facing them on the road. I thought Miami played really well, and Notre Dame hung around and gave themselves a chance late to come back and win that football game. I think that's a really good football program, and so definitely don't want to fault them too much for losing to a top 10 opponent. Clemson, I think losing at home. The reason I have Clemson below Notre Dame and Texas is because they lost at home, right? That to me matters. That should be a huge advantage to you, and it didn't feel like it was in this football game. So Clemson to me is just down there, but certainly a playoff contender, an ACC contender, 100%. And then Arizona State, with Sam Leavitt, I think he's playing really well. Definitely, I think between Utah and Arizona State, I'm not sure who I'd have winning the Big 12 right now. Arizona State's the team that's been there, that's been at the top of that conference since last year. But Utah is a team that showed some really promising signs this past week and could potentially win the Big 12. But for now, I think I feel pretty comfortable with ASU right there at the 10 spot.
Yeah, I think it'll be ASU, Iowa State, right? Those are going to be a couple of the Big 12 contenders, I think. And then you got BYU, who I think is going to be pretty good. BYU ran the ball. We didn't talk about them. Were they in our top 25, Mason? I missed. I don't think they were. They ran the ball for over 400 yards this past weekend. So I don't. I know they didn't play anybody, but it's really, really hard to run the ball for 400 yards on someone. I don't really care who you're playing. That's hard to do. And I think BYU will be a contender in the Big 12 as well this season. So I think those are I think Kansas State was a lot of people's pick. And I think you can kind of back them. They're probably the 4th or 5th best team in the Big 12 right now. Anyway, I digress. 1 through 5, let's do it. Ohio State, LSU, Penn State, Georgia, and Miami. That is your top 5 as of now. Maybe you can argue Miami, at the number 3 spot, possibly. I could see somebody arguing that. But other than that, I don't think there's a ton of argument here. There's been some discussion from some about LSU being number 1 ranked going into this, and you could have a reasonable debate as far as that goes, but Ohio State just won the national championship, and then they turn around and get what everybody considered to be, a top 5 team. There's nobody that didn't consider Texas to be a top 5 team a week ago. So that's huge. They deserve to be number 1. They really do. They're over LSU for sure, in my opinion. Texas is better than Clemson, I think. And so with that being said, I think LSU needs to be at the number 2 spot, considering the win that they got, which was a good one, but not quite as good as Ohio State's, in my opinion. Watch out for Penn State this year, guys. I think Penn State's for real. They had them a team come back, and they were good last year. So I with Drew Aller with a year more of experience and another off season and spring under his belt, and a lot of returning talent, I suspect that Penn State's going to be pretty doggone good and will be a contender. And it's going to be right there in the playoff discussion. I think it's Ohio State and Penn State out of the Big Ten making the playoff when we're all said and done. with this season. We'll see how that kind of develops. Very early to tell now. Georgia at number 4. I could see anybody having Georgia from 4 to 6, anywhere in between there. But I think that'd be about right. Georgia was right up there with some of the best looking. Now they didn't play a top 5 matchup, but they were right up there with the best looking defenses of the year so far. I think you could watch and really see that Georgia's going to have another really good defense this season. Hey, water wet, fire hot. Georgia defense good. These are ways of the world. Since Kirby Smart has been the coach there at Georgia, so I think it's a reload on defense, and I think Georgia looks improved on offense as well. So watch out with everything we saw this weekend. All 5 of these teams on this page right now are national championship contenders. Maybe not in this order, but exactly, when it's all said and done. But I think all 5 of these teams are going to be teams that we're going to be talking about coming out of Thanksgiving week, headed closer and closer to that college football playoff.
Yeah, 100%. I think you really have to look at Miami now as a true contender, mainly because of what they did along the lines of scrimmage. Everybody's going to look at Carson Beck and is he a Heisman contender? Is he going to be a first-round quarterback? All that's important, and all that could happen. But if Miami's going to win a national championship, it's going to be because behind this veteran offensive line, right? And it's going to be because they're multiple on the defensive line up front. I don't really see it being any other way. They seem physical enough to be able to run the football, especially, again, if the offensive line does their thing. But to me, the reason Miami's in the top 5, yes, they got a big win over Notre Dame, but they did it physically. They did it. They brought the physicality to a Notre Dame team that prides themselves on being physical. And to me, that shows a little bit of a transition in the program. And Mario Cristobal certainly is taking a step in the right direction this year. I 100% believe that Miami should be looked at a little bit more seriously moving forward, which they will. And you're completely right about Georgia. I mean, they're obviously going to be a perennial contender, but in this game against Marshall that they played, there were probably 30, 35 players on defense that got to play in this football game, and there was very little drop off throughout the entirety of the game. The guys that we had been hearing about all season long showed up and showed out. They had some freshmen come in there that looked like absolute freaks. Running back room looks absolutely solid. The offensive line played pretty well. Georgia is a team that is definitely looking like a national championship contender, which I think a lot of the talking heads had somewhat written them off, kind of kept them on the back burner. And we were looking at teams like Clemson and Texas as, potential national champions. Well, Georgia, I don't think is going anywhere. And when, and it'll be week 3, I think, before they face anyone, but they'll face Tennessee in week 3. And I think that's when the rest of the national college football landscape will be put on notice about Georgia. Penn State, in a similar way, they don't really play anybody all year. You kind of look at their schedule, and obviously they're going to have to face Ohio State, but outside of that, I mean, you've got Oregon and potentially Indiana being pretty tough. That's about it. But we won't know as much about Penn State on our national level until they go face Oregon in late September. So we'll be kind of circling that one and keeping an eye on Penn State until then. But they did look dominant in their win as well. LSU, I think, had the best win of the weekend. I know, Ohio State going up against the number 1 team in Texas was a huge win. It absolutely was. To me, though, I thought that LSU looks more ready right now in the moment, particularly on offense, than Ohio State does. And that's only natural. They're breaking in, a true or not a true freshman, but a redshirt freshman quarterback in Julian Sayin. So they're kind of piecing the offense together around him. But to me, for LSU to go on the road to Clemson and win that football game, it's a bigger win for me in the week for the LSU Tigers. But that being said, I still feel like Ohio State should be considered the number one team in the country for now. And until they lose, that's probably the way that's going to stay for the most part. I'd be really surprised if the AP doesn't have Ohio State at number one when that ranking comes out tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I would be surprised too, but I also wouldn't be surprised if for clickbait and for, if nothing else, just to get a reaction out of people if they don't slide LSU into that number one spot. Which, by the way, people, Lee Corso picked LSU to win the national championship, and that mofo picked just about every game perfectly this past weekend. He, for what it's worth, he had Penn State and LSU going to the national championship, and that sounded a whole lot stupider to me before I watched all these games this past weekend. And now I watch all these games this past weekend, and I'm like, dude, Penn State has a really good shot this year. They really do. They've got a golden opportunity, and you could say the same thing about the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't think LSU is quite ready to win at the level that Georgia would be able to win at. I don't think they have the depth. I know they don't have the depth defensively. I think they're probably potentially could be better offensively. They haven't showed it yet this season, but we know they have the guys to do it. I think LSU, Georgia in that SEC championship, and I think whoever wins that SEC championship, I think that team's got a good shot. Now, we don't know who's getting injured. Other things can happen. Other teams can bust onto the scene, of course. But I really think Penn State's got a great opportunity here, and I think the Georgia Bulldogs have got a great opportunity if they can go ahead and seize it. This would be a good year to be able to do that. Well, there it is, folks. There's the top 25. Y'all let us know. I'm sure we messed it up somehow. So y'all let us know in the comment section how we messed it up. I'd love to talk with you guys about it.